Blog Talk Radio. Good evening, listeners, and thank you for taking the time to listen to our show, Dark Matters Radio. I'm the Sorceress Cagliastro, blood sorceress and necromancer in the hands of 9, and I am on the air with people that I trust and enjoy and appreciate. On the air with me tonight is my co-host, Chris Rogue Ostrowski. Good evening, Chris.
Good evening, Sorceress. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. And with morganstknight, our producer and science officer. How are you this evening, Morgan?
I'm wonderful, Sorceress. Thank you. Always pleased to be with you on this show.
Thank you. Victor is not with us this evening. He is out and about doing what he needs to do. So, of course, that sounds kind of funny when you're talking about edits. So just to be clear, Victor is not available tonight. He has not been edited. So the question for tonight was life content and edits, a pre-sorcery inventory. I've been teaching sorcery for a very long time and writing about it for an even longer time and doing it for an even longer time than that. But I find that the more people I meet and the more clients have come to me and the more people who come with problems, issues, things that they want to fix or control or change in their life can be controlled without sorcery. Funny for me to say that, but more likely with a simple edit. People who are living amongst people who are not good for them, people who are in relationships that are toxic, people who are in relationships with their own habits in a way that is not appropriate for progress moving forward, if progress moving forward is what they desire. Everywhere we look, there's something that can be edited. Sometimes I just put up statuses that say edit, edit, edit. And people are always interested in those statuses and those kinds of comments because editing is a vital and underutilized tool. Editing is interesting because it can be played out on many, many levels. It can be played out on the emotional level, the physical level, in some ways a physiological level. It can be played out by looking at what you're surrounded with in terms of belief and dogma. In some ways, this show or this concept ties everything together. And the reason that we refer to it as a pre-sorcery inventory is because that which needs to be edited out, when it is edited out, provides us with clarity, and sometimes we have everything else that we need. That which needs to be edited is that which causes clutter. And clutter is deadly. And when I talk about clutter, I don't mean the extra 10 shopping bags on your living room floor. I mean the concept that there are still people in our lives, there are still processes and experiences and jobs and requirements, agreements in our lives that are cluttering us. First, agreements. We make agreements. Those of us with integrity and in the moment make an agreement based on where we are in that moment and what is necessary for all parties. So when we talk about clutter, we have to say, let me take a look at the agreements I've made. If 10 years ago you made an agreement to go to church every week with your friends and with your spouse or whatever, and you discovered that that's no longer in your life and you're still doing it, then that's not an agreement that works for you anymore. If you made an agreement to be in a relationship that's broken and finished, and you're still in it, that's not an agreement any longer, because when you were making that agreement, you were a person capable of or involved with that idea, and that made sense to you. When we look at clutter and we look at where we live, we say, well, I've lived here for a really long time. The rent's really cheap. I'm going to hold on. I'm going to stay here because where else can I live for this little money? Well, where else can you live with that little opportunity? Where else can you live where maybe the streets around you are something you've outgrown, something you've learned is not really part of your life? Maybe the neighborhood or the country. or the building or the tiny space or the too large space. Because editing is important when you have too much and when you have too little. How can you edit away from too little? Well, most gracefully, I would imagine. Sometimes we have to look at the comments that we make, the way that we describe ourselves, any kind of comments of self-loathing, disgust, that kind of thing. Those things must be edited out. And if one took inventory of everything and edited and adjusted and removed what is not feeding them today, then sorcery might not even be indicated. I've met lots of people in this work, and I've met a lot of people who have too much and a lot of people who feel they don't have enough, but they both have one thing in common. They have the wrong stuff. And by wrong, I don't mean my version of wrong. I don't mean Morgan and Chris's version of wrong. I mean the wrong stuff for them. I mean the thing that in that day, in that simple moment in time, is not what they need. They can't function. They can't focus. They're saying, this isn't right for me. So when we talk about edits, we're talking about the hard stuff. We're talking about the things that make it not possible for us to experience forward movement. And by forward movement, what I mean is progress. It is important to remember when we talk about these kinds of materials that no one else can define this for you. As no one else could define your beliefs, no one else could define your intentions, your thoughts, your desires, your requirements. People who think they know you think they can, but they cannot. Only you can in the moments of your truths, of the things that make sense for you. Only you can in the moments that you find to be indicative of some sign of forward movement. The idea of spontaneity is something that comes up as well when we're talking about edits. Sometimes the habitual life experience that we're in makes us feel like editing is not possible. Small edits lead to small openings. Small openings can be called voids, and in sorcery, all voids are filled. In physics, all voids are filled. In anything, all voids are filled. Blow air into a pool, you'll see a depth, you'll see an open space. Take the air away, and the void is filled. The water will close it up. When we do edits, the question becomes, what are we editing? And, more importantly, what are we putting in? This is a really big and important question because if you take out large requirements that you had in the past, you take out things that are things that you've experienced before and that might not fit who you are right now. When you take those things out, it leaves a big hole. When you decide that you have lived in too much space and you don't need it, and a lot of people have that experience, and they want to pare down and find a smaller space, or when you live with someone you can't stand anymore and you want to pare it down and get into a situation where you're living alone or with other people, then all these things that you did, all these moments every day when you got up either in overwhelm or disgust, in anger or in hostility, in feeling displaced in your own reality, when you start to edit, what happens is you suddenly have this openness, this time, this space. What most people do is find something else, miserable, inappropriate, or quick to fill it with, because voids can be uncomfortable. And here's the full circle on this thing. In sorcery, voids are not only not uncomfortable, but they are an opportunity, an opening, a wonderful moment, a rich opportunity to bring in something else that makes sense to us. And when we talk about voids, we talk about sorcery. So I'm going to leave it there for a moment and kick it around and see what my on-air associates think. Chris, what do you think about this subject tonight?
Well, I'm a good example of, I walked away from a 20-year relationship, including marriage and a house, the picket fence, the whole damn 9 yards, to follow my practice. It just wasn't working, and I couldn't do what I needed to do in the situation I was in. And I just made up my mind that was it, and I was going to go do what I needed to do in order to fulfill this part of my life. It wasn't a midlife crisis or anything like that. It was, I had to, on a spiritual sense, and I really don't like that word, but to follow what I needed to do to get to the next step in my practice, in my path. So it was hard, and I mean, you have a lot of second thoughts, but this is all things that you can't have. When you practice sorcery, you just can't have those things. I mean, you have to be in a position where you're comfortable, and you also have to be in a position without doubt. And I think a lot of times people get into that position where they're comfortable, even though it's holding them back, but they need to be in that spot, you know. They don't want to go outside and see what the hell's going on someplace else. It's like, it's always, well, I'll do that later, or, well, no, I don't know about that, or I don't want to give this up, or if you're serious about this work, you have to give up things. That's all it's to it. You can't just say, well, I'll do it later, or, you know, well, I'll work around it. You can't. You have to give up things, and you have to give it up with that in mind and with the knowledge that, okay, this is it. I can't look back. I can't feel apprehensive about it. I just got to do it, because fear is one of the biggest things that'll kill you. And I think that's where people run into problems when they have to do edits in their life. They're afraid of what they're going to lose.
Yeah.
You know, twice in my life, 3 times in my life, I've lost everything I've had. Everything. You know, the last place I lived, I was standing on the doorstep. You know, if I wouldn't have got the house I'm in now, I would have been out in the street. But
not if you knew me, Chris. Not if you knew me, Chris. I just want to say that on the air. Not if you knew me. I'd always be in your corner.
But, you know, you've got to get to the point where, okay, I know I'm in this position, but I'll be all right. I know I'm going to be all right. Why are you going to be all right? Because I don't have any doubt. I've always been all right. You know, why am I always all right? Because I make it that way. You know, and how do I make it? Yeah, and how do I make it that way? Because I've changed things in my life. I've been in this position before, and I've made it work. And there's so many people that want to do this kind of work, but they don't have that commitment. They don't have that self-doubt. I mean, that self-assurance from doubt. And I think a lot of people run into that roadblock, and that's where they have problems. I mean, that's where a lot of the problems that we get with people that, oh, I can't do this, or, you know, I tried this spell, but it's not working. Well, why isn't it working? Well, I don't know, maybe I'm doing it. Well, what do you mean you're doing it wrong? You can only do it one way. You know, well, I'm not sure, but that's it. There's your problem right there. You're not sure. And that's one of the edits you got to get out of your life is you have to be sure. You have to know it works.
Wow. That's pretty powerful, Chris. Do you feel that that people grasp the association to the fact that edits are not just about what you choose to give up or what you choose to change for this work, but that for other things in your life, they're vital?
I don't know. I can't say they do or not. I've seen so many people that come to me and say, well, I've got this problem. Well, I want you to, I want you to do this. We run through the scenario how many times about living with somebody and they want them out of their life. Well, you've got to get out of the house. Well, what do you mean I got to get out of the house? Well, they don't want to do it. Well, if you're not willing to put in the work, what do you expect me to do? I can't make him disappear. This isn't Disney. I can't clap my fingers and poof, he's gone. I can't wiggle my nose, and even if I could wiggle my nose, he wouldn't go away anyway. What exactly do you expect me to do while you're living there?
Chris, let me ask you a question about that, because people come to me all the time, clients come to me all the time and say, I want this marriage to be over. I've put in the paperwork. I've done everything, and he's fighting. He won't let it go, or she's fighting. She won't let it go. And And I say to them, well, a couple of things can happen. We can do an awful lot of sorcery on this. We can go back and forth. We can clear the space. We could do all those things. Or you could decide that you are going to live somewhere else. My point is exactly agreeing to what you're saying. That's why we're calling this a pre-sorcery inventory, because some people think that this is about waving a magic wand and making the other guy go away. And you know what? Realistically, it can be done. Of course it can be done. But what are we left with when we do that? We're standing there, the client or the person who's come to us is standing there in a situation saying, wow, now I never had to do that work. I never had to learn what that felt like. They go back to that person, or they find somebody else to keep them in a trapped situation that's uncomfortable. It doesn't work. So nothing really changes. And what do you think of the word courage, Chris? What does that mean for you?
Well, I was in Marines, so that, my idea of courage and somebody else's idea of courage are two different things.
Do you think you can get it together? Do you think you can bring courage forward in yourself, or do you think it's innate? I mean, how do we talk to people? And I've thought about this as well. I'm sure Morgan does. How do we talk to people to get them to access what we accept to be the word courage? Because it's not a word I actually accept as clear, and so I don't use it very often. But for the purpose of this show, how do we get people to feel that, to get in the place where they feel some courage?
I think when it comes down to who's got courage and who doesn't, people get the wrong idea. I've seen a lot of people suffer through pain and agony, and just to go on with their daily life, it took a lot of courage to do that. It's doing what you need to do when you can. Everything else is against you, and it's hard for you to do it. That's when the courage comes out. I mean, courage isn't because you run up the hill with a machine gun and kill out a whole... No, that's one of the ways of doing it. But there's other forms of courage out there. It's doing what needs to be done at the time, regardless of what's going on around you. You know it needs to be done, and you do it.
Chris, do you think that courage has an association to people who are worried about loss and don't understand that everything you have today is great and wonderful, but if you're not feeling joyful in it, you're not feeling progressive or forward-moving in it, that it's irrelevant? Do you think that people get in a place where the tangible things mean so much to them that they are incapable of seeing the value of what they're not getting intangibly?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the thing of, you know the value of everything but the value of nothing.
Yeah.
You get so hung up on the idea that you have to have this in order for it to... No, you don't have to have that in order for you to be happy. I mean, I know a lot of people that don't have shit. And I know a lot of miserable people that got everything in the damn world handed to them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, where do you draw the line? It's all in your head. It's where you're happy. Where's your place where you're happy? I don't want to sound new agey or fluffy or any kind of shit like that. But, this is facts. I mean, I've seen people with nothing that are happy. Why are they happy? Who the hell knows? Because it's their mindset. It's what they appreciate.
I recently got an email from somebody who said her and her husband have been living in a house going through a divorce for 4 years. I said, I'm sorry, what did you say? She said, I actually said that in the email. What did you just say to me? I just want to be really clear as to what you're saying. And she said they have been fighting through their divorce for 4 years and living in the same house. I said, does it have like 126 rooms, to see each other? She says, no, it's a 2-bedroom ranch house, and we've been fighting for 4 years in the house, over the house. And I said to her, I'm not even going to get involved in this. This is not something I want to be involved in, but I will give you one piece of unsolicited advice, which is get the fuck out. And she said, how could you say that? I put money into... I said, how old are you? And she said, 57. I said, get the fuck out. And I said it again in that way just to get her attention, just to be vulgar and get her attention. And she said, that's ridiculous. Where am I going to... I said, do you have a good job? Do you have a job? She said, yeah, I have a really good job. I said, then go rent yourself a studio apartment and start living your life and get out. Because you've already wasted 4 years fighting over something that one match can take down. And she said that was the first time anybody suggested that to her, that everybody else said, try a third lawyer, or try this, or try that. And I don't know what the monetary value of the house was, but that's irrelevant. The point was that she really lost the plot of what it meant. And I said, well, who initiated the divorce? I'm thinking maybe she had some bitterness or whatever. And she said, no, I did. So it was very interesting, and it's sort of an outline about edits. I said, take three suitcases, fill them with the things that you really feel like you have to have. Go to the door, leave 2 of them there, and go. And that was my response to the whole thing. And she wanted me to make him ill and all that stuff. And I said, there's enough sickness in that house right now. You don't even need me to jump in. But I thought about that a lot after I read that email and had that brief interaction. And I said, people seem to not understand the value of their own time. And I think that that's something that we should talk about is what edits provide us when we make them. Hang in there for a minute, Chris, because I want to get Morgan to jump in. Morgan, what do you think about this subject? I'm sure you have quite a bit to say about this subject.
Oh, yes. People come to me all the time and want me to get rid of someone or something, but usually it's someone.
Yeah.
Now, understand when they want me to get rid of an illness. I don't really do that work that much, but I understand that. That's a logical thing.
Of
but
course.
Here's the thing. People will come to me and say, I have this enemy. Want to make sure this enemy can't hurt me anymore. Maybe it's a rival at work. Maybe it's a rival in personal relationships. Maybe it's just a person who's constantly undermining them if they're in a family situation. And I might say, okay, but we do the work, and then a couple months later, well, someone else is there. Then it's someone else who's a problem. And it's what we've been saying, what you've been saying very nicely and eloquently about a void. The void is getting filled, and what is it getting filled with? Well, it's getting filled with the exact same thing, because these people have carved out a space in their life for that particular type of person. And it's really a mindset. It's they need an enemy. They need a bad guy in their life to blame their problems on. So they've got this little carved out niche for a bad guy, and as soon as one bad guy's out of there, another bad guy is just going to step right into that niche and fill it very nicely again for them, and they're never going to get to the root of their problem. And I try to tell them part of it when they sometimes will come to me and say, it's not people, it's just situations are bad, or I don't have any confidence. And I ask them to tell me, well, what are your friends like? And as we go deeper and deeper into it, I'm like, these people are not your friends. You like your hair the way it is, but you just told me that girlfriend of yours said, no, you don't want to put those chemicals in your hair. You should wear your hair natural. That's the way to do it. It doesn't look right for you to have your hair like that. And any number of put-down comments that people say, and they always say, I'm just trying to be helpful. Whenever I hear the word just in that context, I'm like, there's no such thing as just. You are doing this to build yourself up or to tear someone else down. And there's a wonderful poem by a woman named Louisa Teish who that basically encapsulates what I'm saying, and it ends with, if you don't think you have enemies, you better look among your friends.
That's very interesting and very true.
Yeah, and that's where people have to make those hard decisions and look at their life and they say, well, does this person serve me anymore? Is this a relationship that is fulfilling to me, or am I just keeping it because, we trade holiday cards every year, we're always inviting each other over for dinner? Well, okay, that's nice, and companionship is an essential human need for many people. Not all of us have that need, but many do. But what is really going on? Are you just a crutch for them? Are they just a crutch for you? And are they just draining your energy? Would you rather be doing something else with that time instead of going through these meaningless rituals? And I think if people would just take a good hard look at what we consider to be customs and then say, well, it may be a custom, but it's not helping me, and where is it getting me? Then they would start to be able to cut out all this excess baggage that's weighing them down and taking up their time and taking up their energy and still be perfectly nice people. I'm not saying be antisocial.
It's interesting that you mentioned. It's interesting that you mentioned customs, because my husband and I decided a long time ago. I think my daughter was probably just born, so both of you know how long ago that is. That no possible chance existed in which we would travel for the holidays. We will not drive to anyone's house. We will not sit in traffic. We will not get the most expensive plane tickets and wait online. We will not do any of that. So what people refer to as the holidays this season coming up and that sort of thing from Thanksgiving forward, we do none of this. We sit home and we do exactly what we want and we eat exactly what we want and we spend time napping or whatever it is that we like to do. And that is how holidays are spent. And when people catch on to that, they're startled. And I said, we have edited that out. We will not do it. And it's so startling to people when I say this. They say, oh, you mean like it's not your turn to travel? Like they can't even hear it. So I'm very fascinated with the fact that they can't even hear it. And I'll say, no, it's never been my turn to travel. We don't do it. And then people who caught on to this started to say to us, well, we'll come over. And I will say, well, that's not really the point of this. The point of this is relaxing time. And no one is well, occasionally we'll invite someone, but basically people are not even really invited. We keep it pretty simple. This is such a social, a shock to people who are in this sort of social agreement to go through this drama for 6 weeks pretty much, or 2 months almost, through the whole process before and after of getting in the grip of this thing, and they're startled. So it occurred to me what we edited out of the process was us. And sometimes you have to edit yourself out of the process. This is what I said very much to this woman who told me she's been in this house for 4 years fighting, and it never occurred to her that she's what needs to be edited out. Do you ever have clients, or do you ever have the experience where people come to you and you realize that that's what is really necessary, that they are the meanderer, the yawler, the wallower in the situation? And then I also want to ask you about voids, but, I mean, do you have that experience?
Oh, yeah. And that's the thing. I have to take people sometimes after a few go-arounds when we're trying to pin down what's really wrong, although usually I can pick that up right away. I say, well, I think the problem is you. It's not that the situation, it's you and the situation don't mesh. So, okay, you have two choices. You can spend, as you were saying before, you can spend an awful lot of time and energy and a lot of grief trying to restructure an entire situation. Or you can take 2 seconds, turn around, and say, I'm not part of this anymore. I think that's one of the most powerful forms of energy manipulation you can do. And all it takes is a choice. You don't have to do any ritual. It's just a choice.
Right, and that's why we're calling this pre-sorcery inventory, is because that's exactly what we're doing. We're making the choices to see where it lands. I mean, people's ego gets so heavily in the way that they cannot understand that sometimes they are the problem, if you want to use that word. I don't always use that word because some things are not that black and white, but that they are the crux. They are the compass point in the situation. I have had clients come to me who are fighting for custody of a 16 or 17-year-old, brutally. And I say, excuse me, that's an adult, pretty much. I mean, we're talking about a person who in, 6 to 12 months can never have to see you again. So these kinds of insane running in the wheel thing is where the biggest edits have to happen. And, if you'll indulge me for a moment, this concept of voids is so interesting, and I talk about them a lot because the physics of them and the emotional content of them, and people say, oh, my heart feels empty, and I say, well, what a great opportunity to fill it with something you've never tried before. And voids, the nature of them is that they become filled with whatever is closest and heaviest. If you use, for example, blowing air into water, and you see it leaves that space open, and soon as you stop the air, what happens is what's closest and heaviest is the rest of the water, and it closes it down. But I've thought about what closest and heaviest means at the non-physics level, if you will. And I think closest is what's most familiar, and heaviest is what's most comfortable. So what happens is, if they are fighting for 4 years in a house, a little two-bedroom house that they're fighting for and giving up their space and their emotional experiences and their life for that, then as soon as that happens, they will find another way to fill that void with another situation that traps them. Even if they go get a little studio somewhere, all of a sudden there'll be a person who's taking over half of it. And this is what goes on over and over and over. This sense of habitual self-destruction, habitual self, I want to almost say like emotional mutilation, this kind of thing where you decide that you haven't had enough the first time, so you fill it over and over. You mentioned clients come back to you over and over. I've had that experience where they say, well, remember last time you got rid of this guy, or you got rid of this from me, and so now I need you to do it again. And I said, well, I would like to think that you are the most interesting person in the world, and lightning struck you twice. But what probably happened is you just got in your habitual experience. So this habitual experience is something that we have to look at. Self-editing is not just editing that which is around you, but it's editing the self. And, Chris brought up a good point when he was saying he knew that he'd be fine. And that is what courage looks like. So, thoughts on self-editing, anyone?
Well, shit, I forgot what I was going to say. Damn it.
Do you have a little self-editing moment?
Oh, yeah, I just edited all my thoughts. It's right out of my head. Son of a bitch.
Morgan,
well, I'll jump in. Yeah, sure. I think it's really about self-knowledge and self-honesty, and these are things that people find very, very frightening a lot of times because they built up an image of themselves, and many times in which they're perpetual victims. And if they're perpetual victims, then someone can always feel sorry for them. Someone can always be like I was saying before, the bad person. They're always in the right, these people who have this victimization. And they never once stop to think about what they're contributing to a situation. So if I sit them down and talk to them honestly and say, hey, here's what I think is probably going on. There's a little bit of counseling going on involved with some of these clients I have, and I'm not a licensed counselor, but I don't worry about it because I don't bill myself as any kind of counselor or relationship expert, so I don't think that I could be charged with malpractice or practicing without a license, because what I do practice is enough to pretty much guarantee that no one will cross me without coming away with quite a few bumps and bruises. But I had an interesting experience with a woman. This was a couple of years ago. She was someone who was not particularly unhappy with life, but she was timid. And she said, I need to find a way to calm down because I'm very nervous, very anxious, and I don't know why. And so I did some ritual work with her. I gave her a talisman to carry around with her. And I said, use this as a touchstone. If you need the reassurance, know that the energy is there. You and I put it in together, and that you can use this to reassure yourself. So she came back to me a few weeks later, and she said, I don't think it's really working. And I said, well, okay, where's the talisman? I had made it on a leather thong so that she could put it around her neck, because I thought that would be a good way for her to keep it. But instead she put it in what she called a handbag, but what actually was probably more like the ass end of the Bermuda Triangle. Everything that got sucked up in the Bermuda Triangle ended up in this thing. She hauls this
Survival
thing onto
kit.
my table. Yeah, the table shudders as it plunks down. And she said, no, I keep it in here. And I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be good. So she's digging through this gigantic pouch and pulling out just things, books and silverware and a coffee mug and all this other stuff. And I'm literally expecting that Jimmy Hoffa's head is going to pop out and say, here I am. I wasn't killed at all. I've just been in here this whole time. But
if
no,
that happens, will you call me?
I will, yeah. I'll take a picture of it and I'll post it on Facebook.
Yeah.
And she's into it shoulder deep. Finally, she finds the talisman and pulls it out and gives it to me. And the first thing I notice is that it smells like tuna fish. So at some point there has either been a tuna fish sandwich or perhaps a tuna itself in there. I don't know. And
or worse.
But stuck there, on my gree.
I'm not going to go there.
My little red gree is a bright green lifesaver on my and I never.
Wow.
I always tell people I want them to personalize these talismans, but not this. And this is stuck on there. I mean, I pick up the lifesaver hoping it will just dislodge, and the whole thing comes with it. The whole gree comes with it. And I don't know whether the lifesaver was lime or whether it started out as some other color and just mutated into that green in there. And I said, look at what you're carrying around with you. This little talisman isn't going to help you, even if you did wear it around your neck, because you are building a barrier around yourself with things. I said, let me come over to your house and let's see if we can do some work there. I went to her house, and it was in the pre-hoarder stage, meaning that there was still a square path from the living room to the back bedroom that you didn't have to navigate walking sideways between towering stacks of newspapers and everything else, but she had a lot of stuff in there. And I said, this is the problem. Right here, all of this stuff, it's going to kill you because you're using this as a security blanket. And that's one of the problems. Until you learn to get rid of all this stuff, until you edit your mind and say, I don't need all these things. And she certainly did not need to be carrying around a handbag that was big enough to put Mount Rushmore in. And it might have been in there for all I know. I didn't get a peek inside.
So sad.
But I said, it is. I said, until you learn to let go of this, you're never going to be able to open up and experience life. You're going to build these walls around you, and you get more and more and more stuff, and eventually it'll kill you. That was the last I saw of her. She wasn't
because people don't want to change that.
It.
You know, when I was living a long time ago, I was temporarily staying in a house in upstate New York. I did a reading for somebody who said to me, when he contacted me, he said, I don't know what it is, I just can't find a home. I just can't, no matter what I do, it's never a place that I can stay for long, and something always goes terribly wrong. And so he came over and we did a reading in person, and he pulls out of his pocket to make himself comfortable so he can sit down a key ring that looks like it is like the jailer's key for the last 500 years or something. There had to be 150 keys on that ring. And I said, wait a minute, what is this? you know, I mean, I collect a few antique, like castle keys, this kind of thing, but I said, what, are you collecting keys? And he looked straight in my face. He goes, no, these are all the homes I've had. I said, you're 37 years old. How is this possible? What are you saying to me? And he said, well, I always keep the keys so I can keep a moment of that energy with me. So I said to him, you know, you can pay me for the...
Murderers do that too.
What? Yeah, I know.
Serial killers do that too.
Yeah, it's called trophies. I said, you know, you can pay me for a reading of sorcery and we could do all that, or you can throw those in the garbage and consider not carrying every memory of every home you've ever had with you and having a clear and clean, fresh slate to start from. And he said, these keys don't have anything to do with this story. And I thought, wow, he doesn't even see what the edits are that need to be done. He just can't even see what the edits are that need to be done. And I'm saying, what? How could you not see that? And he said to me, well, I don't think we're going to get along because you just don't understand that I'm a very sentimental guy and I have to carry around everything that's ever happened to me. And I thought, well, that's low-hanging fruit. That's right there. I chose not to do any work with him because I really felt that he was someone who had already made the decision of how it is, and therefore we could not get through that. But Morgan, you made a comment, pre-hoarder stage, and that's what I felt there. I felt that place, that moment. We were right there.
And you just mentioned he's a very sentimental guy. That's another thing that'll kill you. The sentiment. There's some, if you have a perfect memory of a wonderful, exhilarating experience, that's one thing. That's not going to leave you. But sentimentality means to me that you're clutching it to you as if it's your last hope of survival, and you're clinging to it out of habit. You're not clinging to it because it gave you exhilaration. You're clinging to it out of duty or obligation.
Yes, absolutely. And that I'm so glad you said that. The difference between having a wonderful memory that just you enjoy and it sticks with you, and people should have those. Those things are great to have. There's a huge difference between that and the ones that are, like stapled to the back of your coattails and you're dragging them around because you feel some sort of connection to them, and that your life stopped then. There are people who say to me, my life is over. It stopped the last time so-and-so, was with me or slept with me or came to my house or told me they loved me or so, whatever it was that is their moment, their like the sort of break in the continuance of their reality. And I said, well, whenever I hear that, I say, well, what if you just let go? And I might as well have said, what if you just, cut your own head off? The startle affect is unbelievable to me. The people are so horrifically startled by that. I've said to people who have been in the same job for 20 years and who are well off, not even people for whom they have a consideration of how to continue paying their bills. I said, well, why don't you just do something else? And I have so many brief memories of people repeating those words, do something else, as if I had said something really ugly. And they just look at me and they repeat it and they say, do something else? I say, yeah, why don't you just edit out this entire thing and, go do whatever other thing that you want to do. I mean, you've worked really hard. You've set yourself up so that you don't have to continue doing this. So why are you doing it? And they'll say things to me like, well, because this is what I do, or this is what I was trained to do. And so the sense of being stuck in the loop, not everything that we edit out is something that's so clear or just toxic or just right there in front of us that has to go. Sometimes the whole loop they've created is at issue. Even things like, I have clients who come to me and they're exhausted, and I say, well, what is your life like? And they say, well, I get up at 5:30 and I go to work. And we discover that they are really nocturnal. And so they have to, if they want to do the work, they have to make major edits and change things around and live at night. These kinds of things, these things that seem crazy, that seem like, how could I possibly do that? Well, of course you can do it. You can make these enormous edits, and you can make these tiny edits. So why don't people make the edits? And it's got to be more than, we use the word fear, we use the word they're afraid, all these. It's got to be more than that. It has to be, because I can't imagine that people are just living in some perception of fear. And if anyone hasn't heard me say this a million times, I don't accept fear. I think it's just a combination of inconvenience and not knowing what to do next. Whether it's a knife to your throat or whether you're afraid to go on a date, it's still inconvenience and not knowing what to do next. So are there other mechanisms? What do you both think about that?
Well, you said about the job, and I've heard this a long time ago. In America, we identify ourselves by our work. What do you do? I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm a mechanic, I'm a whatever. Whatever you do to make money is what you identify yourself as.
Yes.
Where if you ask somebody like over in France, what do you do? And they'll say, I'm an artist. No matter if he's waiting tables or a cook or whatever, it's what he does that makes him happy. Well, we don't do that here. So everything that's connected with what we have has to do with what we do for a living. It's our identity. And a lot of people can't get over that, because if you take it away, they lose themselves.
Yes.
It's like they're not. You just take their whole life and pull it out from underneath them because they're not who they are anymore. I never got into the trap, and I know so many people that did. When I got done with work, I put my tools in my toolbox, and I was done. I mean, I worked on my own car if I had to, or if I worked, somebody else if it was an emergency or something like that. But just for shits and giggles on the weekends, I got better things to do. It's like I didn't pull things in. I never lived in a house that had a garage on purpose because I wasn't going to get stuck in that.
That's very interesting, what you just said. That is extremely powerful. You never lived in a house with a garage for that reason, because then you would have gone home from work and gone back to work in your garage.
Yeah, and so many people do that, and that's their life. That's their identity.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have anything else.
Wow.
And if you take that away, what do they have? Nothing.
Yeah. Well, I have a client he's completely identified with where he lives. He's American. He's not living in America. He's living in a country that very few Americans even go to. And I said he hates it. He's been there, I think about, 5 or 6 years. And I said, so leave. And he's like, yeah, but he's a writer and he writes about that place. And I said, well, even your writing is going to suck now because you're writing about a character of yourself. You're not even writing about the experience. Or what will happen is you won't be writing about the experience anymore. You'll be writing about what you think people want to hear, which is his work is very genuine. And I would imagine after my last conversation with him that his work will not be as genuine moving forward. It will be about a little bit more contrived of an experience of what he thinks the readers want to hear. And that's a really bad place to get to. And, I very rarely use the words good and bad, but that's a bad place to get to. And so this habitual identification is a very difficult thing. It's why people don't come out. It's why people don't get divorced. It's why people don't leave religions. It's all kinds of things. The biggest things stick us in habitual relationships with the thing itself that's creating the most anxiety for us. And I'm sure, Morgan, you come across people like this all the time.
Yes, I do. And I think there's a good question in the chat room I want to get to real quickly, but I think one of the problems is it's a matter of comfort. We're comforted even when we feel discomfort because it's familiar. Mm-hmm. It's the unknown that makes us go crazy. And we take a step and it's like, well, what if this is a totally painful process to me? Well, good. Then it means you're alive. It means you felt something. I think that's great. But people will put up with the relationship. They'll put up with going through the ritual of going to church every week. They'll put up with the job that they don't really like or the place they don't really like to live because it's comfortable and they would rather have that security. And that kind of leads into the question Tin Roof asked, could it be a problem that people feel they won't be grounded? If they step into the unknown, they'll be free-floating, which could be scary. Mm-hmm. I think that's a good point. I think that's a very good point. When you don't have that ground under you, it's a very scary feeling. But it can also be liberating because then you're floating and then you have infinite possibilities around you. You don't really have any ties.
I'm not sure I accept that you can be grounded. And, I always take it to this extreme because it's just the way that I'm wired. It's the way that I think. Yes, there is definitely an issue of power of place. Yes, there is definitely an issue of power of identity and all of that. But I'm not sure that we can be grounded. If you lived in a house your whole life and it's the most important thing to you in the whole world, if it's like Manderley from Rebecca, then, and somebody burns it to the ground, you're screwed. You have no sense of where to go, what to do. If your marriage comes apart and you've grounded yourself in that. So this idea of grounding, I think, is somewhat dangerous. There's comfort, sure. There's a sense that this is a good place for you and that this works for you. But the question has to be asked: are you grounded because you feel a true sense of joy or placement, or are you grounded because you don't know what to do next and you're settling? This idea of settling is a dangerous one. So I don't know that grounded is always the best achievement. I think being in a place that's serving you in all of your areas, emotionally, mentally, physically, all these kinds of things, is great. But grounding is identifying yourself. I think it can be dangerous. Am I on the outside on this one?
No. I think that as far as grounding goes, if you're going to do this kind of work, regardless if you're going to do sorcery or you're going to do root work or whatever, you better have your shit together that you're grounded no matter what. If you're upended in any situation, you better have your ass together that you're going to hit the ground running. You know,
so the grounding is you.
Right. You know, you are the one in control. People've got to remember that. You know, you're the one that's going to be in control of this. You're the one that takes care of you. Nobody else is going to do it. Nobody else cares.
Yeah, that's right. Nobody else cares. You're absolutely right about that. You know, this idea that you could get off a plane in another country and just start a life. I've done that before. That was fun. In the sense that you could just say, you know what, I've lived here long enough. I want to go have another experience. I've done that many times. Not because I felt forced out, but because I wanted to have another experience. So I don't know that we ever finally get there. We become the best tool we can be is to be what you're saying, Chris, is to be the grounding, to be enough within ourselves. I mean, can you stand alone on the tarmac? In one of the books that I wrote a thing about being as alone as possible on a tarmac and no other sound around you, and what that actually means in sorcery is different from not different, but also means something in sorcery. But for our sake in the moment right now, can you be as grounded, if we want to use that word, in that moment as you are when sitting with your family or your lover or whatever it is that brings you to that sense of power, personal place? Because if not, then you're not bringing everything you can to every situation. And this is not an easy place to get to. It comes from editing. Being a real source of grounded energy comes from editing. Because if you're standing in your world and somebody, moves the salt shaker 6 inches to the left and you go crazy, because we all know people like that, people who have this sense of how it's supposed to be all the time, and you're living in that, then you're in this agitation. You cannot possibly function in a world full of change, and you can't be spontaneous, and you can't take what's next. And these kinds of this sort of resiliency comes from doesn't come from having your world so perfectly set up. It comes from having your ability, your sense of self, your sense of I can function in anything so completely set up. Any thoughts on that?
I go back to a song. If anybody remembers the song Me and Bobby McGee, there's a line there that says, freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose.
Yep. Yeah.
And this is exactly what we're talking about. When you have nothing, nobody can take it away from you. And sometimes we got to go back to that place in order to be where we are truly free to do what we need to do, whether it's physically that way or mentally that way.
What if I added to that, Chris, and said, you said if you have nothing, no one can take it away from you? What if I said you don't require anything else? Nobody could take that away from you. By which I mean that you know that you can stand where you are no matter what hits you. And you'll be all right. Because people get very freaked out when they think about not having stuff. I have this idea in my mind sometimes, and when I talk about this, my daughter just shakes her head. She can't even believe it. And I say, what I'd like to have? I'd like to have like one of those gypsy caravans and just sort of drive around in it and see what happens. Now, it's not something I want to do in America because of my own personal opinion of where this would be fun for me to do. But I would just like, to be back in the UK, which we will be in eventually, and just have one of these things and drive around, have an experience, and have everything in it I need, like my little house on wheels, and just go be that thing and just drive around and meet people and stop where I want to stop and this kind of thing. And I find this idea fascinating and something I will probably eventually do. And she says to me, you're crazy. Why would you want that? Why would you want to not have some sort of grounding? And I said, well, I am grounded. My guess is that in the best case scenario, I will wake up every morning being who I am, so it's fine. I brought everything with me. And this is a really startling thought to some people. But the world the modern world is a strange place. The sense that there is a status quo or a dream to which one should aspire to have is an interesting thing. I think that if we realize that which we require as the thing that is our desire, and I don't use the word goal, because to me goal is just a line you've drawn that you cannot go past. So I don't get involved in the word goal. But if we look at our individual desires and requirements, two very good words, and stop comparing those to the rest of the world, because some of edits has to do with comparison. Some of edits has to do with living in the world with immediate gratification. Some of edits have to do with the thing we have not talked about yet, which is huge, which is what will other people think of me? And, long ago, the what would other people think of me train left with me. I mean, I don't even know where that train went. But if I say to clients and to students, people studying, people who want to come to this work and get something out of it that's usable right away, they say to me, well, I would leave my job, which I hate and I've been doing for 18 years or whatever. But, what would everybody in my group of people who are in my world think of me? And I say, well, the better ones would stand up and applaud you in the fact that you are now going to try something else that you might love. And the best case scenario is the lesser ones will fall away. And then you would have some new idea about voids and freedoms, and people would step in and all of this kind of thing. So what of this idea that people don't edit because other people are watching?
Well, it's self-awareness and self-image. And they're building their self-image not on what they themselves think about themselves. They're building it on what they believe other people think about them. And what will someone else think? What will the neighbors think? Am I keeping up with the Joneses? I don't understand where this absolute obsession with the opinion of other people develops from. I'm not sure whether it's something, I have a hard time believing it's something we're innately born with, and yet it seems to be so pervasive in so many different cultures in so many different ways. I mean, if you go to places in Asia, if you go to Japan and Korea and China, oh my gosh, if
ground zero for that.
They have interesting ways of getting their kink on. I gotta say, they found some interesting societal ways to make that kind of stuff acceptable. But if you don't fit the mold, then you can be. I mean, it's changing a little bit among the younger people that I know from those parts of the world. There seems to be a lot more freedom, but man, they're catching it from their parents and from their older relatives for being different. But even here, where you would think that in a country where people go around with blue hair and piercings everywhere, they're still, I think, they're still worried about what people think of them too. And what's important is they say, I don't care what other people think about me. They're just more worried that people are thinking about them, that they are reacting to them. And that's kind of the same thing. If I don't get a reaction from someone, have I lost my self-worth?
So you're saying that people see who they are by how much energy is being put at looking at them? Yeah,
I think that's a good way to describe it. And so they have there's two standards. There's one where I have to get this attention, and then there's one where I have to actually be worried about someone else's opinion.
And then
I think they're two sides of the same coin.
There's a third level of that, which is if I stay normal enough, no one will notice me. A lot of people are in that show. They're in that, if my house looks like everyone else's house, and I go to the right church, and I and I don't have blue hair and piercings and all this sort of thing, and and I have everything is normal, and that's a strange word, but just for the want of a word to use in this conversation, then people will not notice, and that will be great too. I think that the more people I talk to, the more I notice that people are looking for that sensation, that idea that they can disappear into the social norms is very useful to many people or desirable. I don't see how that's possible. One of my associates said to me recently, he said, well, maybe you think people have more to say than they do. And I thought that was very interesting to be called out on that and have to think about that. Because I say to people all the time, well, if you want to go try and be a painter, go try and be a painter. Do whatever it is that makes you feel a sense of adventure or joy. Why not give it a shot? And many, many times when they say that to people, they say, well, no one would want to see my work. What could I possibly offer? So this idea of hiding behind the social norms is the full swing to the other end of what editing is. And yet people may be editing out who they are so that they can fit into that. Do you come across that?
I have a client that I'm dealing with right now that thinks that their work isn't good enough for people to look at.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
And it's so hard to get into somebody's head and get them to understand, look, there's shit out there. But unfortunately, you can't judge art that way. I mean, what some people consider art, other people consider trash. And that's just the way it is. I mean, who would have thought that Andy Warhol would have took off the way he did? I mean, honestly, look at what he did. But yet, it's considered one of the greatest examples of art in this country. So you never know what people are going to like. So you got to go out there and you got to look at, I might get turned down. People might look at this and tell me, hey, your shit is bad. But you've got to be ready for that, and you've got to be able to accept that. And that's all part of the process, because if you don't get that, you're not going to learn.
Are people fragile?
A lot of times, yeah. I mean, characters really sucks lately. I notice we really don't have a whole lot of strong people. I mean, you have the people that are pulling the strings, but there's a lot of followers in the world.
Yeah, I agree.
There's very few. I was born in the 60s, but I remember a lot of the 70s. And I look at the people that were during that time, and I'm thinking, where the hell did you all go?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where is everybody? Where's the people that had ideas? Where's the people that had all this strength and power, and we were going to run the world and all this, and now you're all just sitting around jerking off somewhere.
Are they actually doing that, Chris?
Probably. Or you're too damn afraid you're going to lose your fucking benefits,
mm-hmm.
Or your retirement or whatever the hell, What the hell did you do? Why did you lose your backbone? And I think we have that problem in this country. And a lot of the people that I run into are like that. You don't need me to do sorcery. You need me to kick you in the ass.
Well, that's exactly what this show is about. Good point. So there's two things: immediate gratification and a sense of entitlement that make people not willing to do edits. What do you think about that?
Oh, I'm sure of it. I mean, I see. I'm 50, so I belong to the AARP because I get 25% off a pizza, at Papa John's.
That's really the reason to do it. I agree with you.
That's the only reason. But I read the newsletter and the magazine that comes around. I'm saying, oh, you bunch of whiny little bitches. What the hell?
Yeah.
It's like, you can't be the people that were fighting at Kent State and picketing here and sitting here in Washington and all. What the hell did you do? Did you get that comfortable in your life that you're afraid that you're going to lose something? What are you afraid of? You're going to die? So what?
It's funny what people protest and what they don't protest. I know someone who lives in the UK who is actually, the jobs that she's had most of her life are jobs that were subsidized by the government. Various art programs, she taught dance for a while, and all those kinds of things, very heavily subsidized programs so children could get in these things and whatnot. And she is deeply involved in protesting the monarchy. And I said to her, well, what do you think people go there to see? They don't go there to see, it's not the food, I can promise you that. So the monarchy is, in that system, is what people go to see, whether you accept it or you don't. It's what brings the tourist trade. And much of the work that she does also is affected by whether or not there are tourists in the country. And she said, well, I'm going to fight this, until the day I retire. And I just started to laugh, and I said, when the day you retire on the pension that you got from the very people that you're protesting against, who have supported programs for you to work in. And she looks me straight in the face. She says, well, no system is perfect. And I thought, what am I even hearing? Our sense of entitlement, our sense of righteousness and all of this business is so exhausting, so boorish to even have to hear about it. But I've said to her a million times, what is it you want to do? And what she wants to do has nothing to do with the work that she's doing. And she says, well, I want to do this thing. And I said, well, why don't you? And she said, well, because there's no pension. There's no way to retire on it. So I think sometimes about what it is that I do. I mean, talk about no pension and no way to retire on it. For a long time, people said to me, really, well, what's your day job? Well, this is my day job. I do this all the time. This is what I do. I either write about it or teach it or do it for clients or I do readings. This is what I do. And people say to me, I can't believe you have the courage to do that. And really, it's not that I have the courage to do that. It's that there is nothing else that I can see myself doing with my life. It is a core value for me. This is what I must do because this is what feeds me at all the levels, at the intellectual level, at the emotional level. I know that I've contributed something. I look at the books that I've written and, love them or hate them, think they're great or think they're garbage. It doesn't matter. I know that I've contributed a new way to look at sorcery and a system that makes sense and a system that works. So, contributing is so relevant to me. Do people not care about contributing? I'm not talking about activism. I'm not talking about going out and getting signatures. I'm not talking about anything in particular. I'm talking about showing up and contributing. Are people not doing it? Is this what I'm seeing? Because that's what I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so. And I think part of it is they're not contributing because they don't feel that they have sufficient resources to let anything go. They may have wonderful things to contribute, but somewhere in there's a blockage that they say, if I give this up or if I contribute this thing, then I will somehow be diminished. I will somehow be less. And I think when we're talking in terms of knowledge and understanding, that's just a load of crap. I don't see how knowledge, if it's dispersed, how it in any way leads me. It's not like I'm writing it on my hand and then cutting my hand off and giving it to someone. So I think it's this sense that somehow they feel they don't have enough. They're lacking in any personal sense of, I keep coming back to self-identity, but they really don't have a foundation for a self-identity. They're predicating their existence on all these external things and all these opinions of other people, and I can't give because I'm in needy mode. I need to keep getting and getting and getting. And it's a selfish thing in a way, but not a constructively selfish thing. It's something that will ultimately end up leaving them even worse off than they were before.
Do you think people know how to contribute? How to leave something? I do too. I think everybody can figure out something to contribute. What does contribute mean? Well, then there's a broad chasm between what I might think contribute means and what you might think contribute means, but that's the beauty of the thing. That's the beauty of things. People say to me, oh, I can't contribute. I want to write a book, but I can't because I'm in a miserable marriage and it takes up all my time, and it brings us back to edits. And I say, well, if you want to contribute, if you want to make something that's different, if you want to make a statement, something that lasts, if you want to have a legacy, maybe you have to be really uncomfortable and get rid of a lot of stuff. Because discomfort is a funny thing. People will come to me in the greatest discomfort. I'm in a horrible marriage. I'm in a horrible business relationship. Blah, 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 all kinds of stuff. And these are very real feelings. I don't mean to minimize what they're feeling. But I say to them, well, then you have to, move out, or you have to get rid of that, or you have to change your mindset, or you have to stop doing this or that. And they say to me, well, that'll be very uncomfortable. And I say, well, you've come here in great discomfort. How uncomfortable are you willing to be? And I tell people this all the time. There are many things in life you cannot go around. You have to go through them. And this sense of immediate gratification, instant fix, take a pill, get in the support group, all of this business, is not really what pushes you forward as a person. Edits are what push you forward as a person. Deciding that you've had enough of something, having the courage to walk away, these things push you forward as a person, not this sense of comfort. And I'm not diminishing in any way a person's right or desire to have beautiful things and feel comfortable. We all want some of that. I certainly do. I have some beautiful things and feel very comfortable in them. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when you don't own the things anymore and the things own you. When the idea that a particular car that you have might not be in your life if you have the wherewithal to leave a miserable relationship and shake yourself out and start over. So for 10 minutes in your life, you won't have that car or that house, or you won't be seen on the arm of that person. Sometimes I have pretty high-profile clients, and they say to me, I can't divorce him because I'm known as his wife. Well, not to his girlfriend, you're not. So, think about what's real. Do people think, so all that diatribe leads me to the question, do people think about what's real when you ask them to edit, or are they thinking about the fantasies, stories?
I don't think they get the gist of what I'm saying because I have to explain it so many times.
Mm-hmm.
If they understood what I was saying right away, I wouldn't have to go into some kind of diatribe about what it means to, or you've got to give this up, or you got to stop doing this, or you've got to remove yourself from this position and things. And you just get this like blink, 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 blink. It's like you ain't catching a damn thing that's coming out of my mouth, are you? And I just think they don't understand because it's, to some people, is such a radical idea to not be that anymore. That they just don't know what to do with it. It's like, here, I want you to quit working at this place you're having. It's causing you problems. Well, what do you mean? I want you to quit working at that place. Find another job. Well, how am I supposed to do that? Well, the same way you found that job, idiot. What the hell? I ain't going to give you one. I'm not going to fill out the application for you. And then it becomes, well, I don't have time for that. Well, what do you mean you don't have time for that? You can't fill out an application sometime? 90% of the places that you go to, you can go online and do it.
Chris, let me ask you this question. What about what people love? What about doing what you love? Because when I say to people, you have to do what you love, what you're passionate about. And I'm a little weird about the word passion because sometimes it's overused and people don't necessarily understand what it means because it's a powerful word, it's a big word, it's a strong word, and sometimes it's too much. What if you did what you like? Let's go there. Let's just say to people, well, consider doing what you like. Even this sometimes is too much for people. They're doing what they should be doing, they think. What is the mechanism? What is the problem? I mean, how can you possibly contribute or get to the point where you're down to the bare bones? Because sorcery is necessary when you get to the bare bones. It's necessary when you can't leave the situation, when there's something about the situation holding you that is beyond your mental capacity to fix with a few edits. This is when you get to sorcery. That's why we're calling this show pre-Sorcery, the editing that one must do before sorcery. Before you come to me, what can you cut out? So do you think that people don't understand that? Do you think that they don't understand that if you are doing even something that you like, if you're standing in the truth of who you are for a moment, the rest of the stuff starts to fall away. I mean, that certainly happened in my life when I wrote the first book, and those people in my life said, oh, great, now everybody will know what you do. Well, yeah, maybe. That's okay with me. And a lot of those people disappeared, which was really made it easier for me to not have to navigate people's opinions. So are people not able to see that if they do what they like, that these voids get filled with what they like as opposed to it just filling back in with the water? Do you think that's what's happening?
I think people misunderstand that. Just like what I was doing, when I worked as a mechanic. But I always liked working with animals. I would volunteer my time at the one golden retriever rescue here.
Right, you get it in your life. Get it in your life where you can, right. Mm-hmm.
I was doing what I like to do. Now, it didn't pay my bills, fine. I had a job that paid my bills. That gave me the opportunity to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you got to have that little bit of give and take. And I don't think people get that. When you tell them, well, you got to do what you like, and it's like, well, I can't quit my job. Well, I didn't tell you had to quit your job. I'm telling you have to do what you like.
Right.
Right away you're getting ahead of yourself, and it's like, I'm not telling you to do that. Think, listen to what I'm saying and then ask questions when I'm done. That kind of thing. And like I said, right away they jump to conclusions.
Right.
It's, no, this is, no, I'm not saying that. I don't want you to go broke. If you go broke, you can't pay me. What good's that going to do me?
Well, people get in the worker bee mode. They decide that, and this is what you were saying in the very beginning of the show, which is why it's so interesting to me. People define themselves by what they do, and not everywhere in the world do people do that. They do it in some countries. It's not so common to do it in others. But if you say to someone, well, what do you do? And you say, well, I'm a writer, and because I write in the middle of the night and I love it so much, and I'm going to write until I get published, and then you say to them, well, that's what you do, and they'll say, well, no, I work here, I work there, and this is the way that I pay my bills. So when we talk to people about edits, we're not saying to them, walk out of the job that you have, walk out of the marriage that you have because it's inconvenient or you don't like it a little bit or there's some glitches. We're talking about editing out the stuff that's stopping you, and this is sort of coming full circle, editing out the stuff that's stopping you from having the time to do the things that you really feel that you love or that will develop into contribution or that will develop into the kind of joy that will clear away what's going on. People say things to me about lovers, and they say, oh, yeah, well, my lover's this, he or she is that, and they're dragging me down, and they're depressing, or they're just not right for me, or we're not doing this part of the relationship or that part of the relationship. And I say, well, the slot called lover means a certain thing, and find someone who can do that. And these are important things that we don't forget what our gratifications are, what the things that we require are. Requirements and desires have to replace needs and wants, because needs and wants leave you in place of needs and wants. But requirements and desires are sort of an instruction manual as to where to go next. So do people not know that? Because I think that many of them do not know that. I think the modern world training is so specific and so PC that people don't realize that they can say, I have made an error or I have made a choice that doesn't fit me. So I'm going to undo that and make a new choice. This is why people live in misery. I'm done ranting.
I think a lot of that is because in Western society especially, there's this whole guilt thing where people are, again, back to the image and worrying about what other people think. People are afraid that they're going to be selfish if they do this. And you have to be selfish. It's called being selfish constructively. Being selfish destructively is staying in those untenable situations because you've reached a comfort level and you're making yourself and everyone around you miserable because no one wants to be around you when you're not happy. And that's why you're absolutely right, people don't understand the great importance of fulfilling desires and fulfilling requirements. I won't use the term needs, but requirements, because they're taught that that's selfish, they're taught that's bad, and if you have any religious background in this country at all, unless you're very, very lucky and had a very open religious background, you're taught that a lot of these needs and requirements are actually sins. Because then that's it. You're going to be burning. And even if you no longer buy into this idea that some invisible old man in the sky is sitting there watching everything you do and making notes, then you still have that little bit. There's still that thing in the back of you that says, yeah, but I've read all this stuff that says really it's too selfish and it's not constructive to have this particular desire fulfilled. And that's a huge problem with us. It's all about guilt and shame.
You know, I couldn't agree with you more. The things that people hold on to, the things that they don't edit out, they have some idea that there'll always be more time, or that they can go live their life, in sort of a backroom version of a truth, and that's in some way a compromise. So this idea of compromise is deadly. I was talking to one client the other night, and I was talking about this concept of debating. And he was saying, he was trying to show some extraordinarily fundamental Christians that he worked with that they were wrong about stuff. So he spent a lot of time looking at a Bible and underlining things that could increase his ability to show them that their position had holes in it. I said, so wait a minute, let me get this right. You spent your time purchasing this book, drawing in it, writing in it, so you could defend yourself against something you have no belief in. He just looked at me for a minute, and I said, here's the edit you need. You have to stop debating. You have to stop debating. Debating is a huge waste of time. And I don't mean like if you're on the debate team. That's a different thing. I don't mean if you're using it to develop negotiation skills or whatever that is in your business. I'm talking about debating. I'm talking about you say to a person, oh, you know what, I feel this way about a politician. And another guy jumps in and tells you his point and then spends the next 45 minutes trying to get you to hear his point. There is no bigger waste of time than this thing. People will say to me, I don't know, should I study sorcery? Should I not study sorcery? Here, I'll give you a very high-tech experiment. Take a class. If you hate it, don't come back. There you go. High-tech experiment in place. And this all comes down to these debates. Show me I'm wrong. Show me you're right. This kind of exhausting thing. If you took out the debating, if the edit that you did, if leaving what you do is too huge, if leaving who you're with if you don't like them is too huge, if leaving a religion that you can't stand but your family's involved in it is too huge, just do this thing. Just edit out this constant need to debate. This constant need, and I don't mean healthy communication where we talk about two sides of the coin and maybe somebody comes up with something interesting. That's what I'm talking about. This desire to prove that you are right to the other person in a profound way for no reason whatsoever. Everyone has done it. Everyone knows what a waste of time it is. Clients try to get me to do it. They say, "Oh, but this and but that, and actually I love him, but we're not good together." So what do you think? And I think there you go. And debating is what keeps us in a place where we can't stay or go. It's what keeps us in a place where we are on the line in the middle. This dangerous waste of time on the line in the middle. Thoughts?
Well, on my end, I mean, what I do as far as the sin eater part of my line.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I can watch people. I can get done cleaning somebody out, to the point that everything's going the way they're supposed to. They feel better. There's no, all kinds of guilt, and within 2 days, I'm getting calls back that they're not feeling good. They got pain. They got this. They got that. Well, what are you doing? What happened? And people, they get on this guilt idea that, they're not allowed to have this. They're not allowed to do this, that they have to do things this way. And I've said it before. It's like this weighs on you like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah, of course.
This takes up so much room inside you that it's enough to drive you crazy. And that's what I think happens to a lot of people. It's just, and I don't care how many times you tell me that you've said the Lord's Prayer backwards, or you've danced underneath the moonlight at midnight in your fucking robe around a campfire. You're still, if you're following any kind of dogma, whatever it is, I don't give a damn what religion it is. If it's some kind of religion, you have dogma. As long as you're following that, you're going to be screwed, because you have a set of rules on you that are imposed by somebody else.
Agreed. And that's a really good point, because no set of rules fit you unless you wrote them. And then if you wrote them and 10 years go by, they don't fit you anymore. Fluidity. It's all about fluidity. And by this I mean that it's all about how we transition from one moment in our lives to the next without having to carry the torch for the moment before that. People grow, they change, they evolve. They sometimes change a little bit over time. Sometimes they change wildly over time, and they just don't fit where they are anymore. This sense of evolution within one lifetime is very valid. I'm not the same person I was 20 years ago. Nobody is, and if you are, then that's an issue, if nothing has changed. We all grow. We all look in the mirror and we see different things. I mean, even the sorcery changes. I'm working on something right now with my master student that is insane. We're talking about this, working within the speed of a synapse and what that means, and understanding that. And we're doing 24 experiments on it. It's a very powerful next phase to this work. We're doing some work on that, and we're doing some work with reflection, and then eventually we're going to bring smoke into the reflection, and that's with another student. And this thing is growing all the time. And when people talk to me when I talk to people about that, they say, well, aren't you afraid that, a new theory will disprove an old theory? And I say, I'm not afraid of anything. It makes it better, makes it more efficient. And if all the material I've written, I come up with things that are faster, stronger, and better, then it's even better to me that all the previous material exists out there written down for people to see it, because it shows one thing that's vital. It shows that I am an experimenter. It shows that I am a person who understands transition and growth and change, and it shows that I can do the one thing that is the most vital, which is edit. And that is when someone says to me, well, I want you to fix this. My boss is bothering me, my friends are bothering me. And I say, well, maybe you're a whiny little bitch, and you need to take it down a notch and say to yourself, maybe I'm the centerpiece here. Maybe I'm the one who is causing all this flux in my own life, and take some responsibility. Editing is about looking at what you're doing, not just what's being done to you. These are vital issues. So maybe the word that we want to use is responsibility. Before you go and you see a card reader, and before you go and you see someone for divination, before you go and you ask someone to knock off your boss because he's bothering you, look at what your part is in that. At least come to it with your part cleaned up. So when it gets to sorcery should work on the smallest possible aspect of the situation. You plug sorcery in when there's no logic anymore to get rid of or bring in or heal the thing. You go to sorcery when someone says you have an illness and they don't know how to make you stay alive. You go to sorcery then. You go to sorcery when you've done all the edits that you can do, and you've gotten out, and you've taken responsibility, and gotten rid of this and that and this guy and that woman or whatever you have to get rid of, and you're standing there, it still doesn't work and you can't figure it out. Then you go to sorcery. That's what it's for. It works the tiniest, most vital facet. It doesn't work the stuff that you can fix yourself. So it's 10:30, and I'm actually thinking of winding this up soon. So final comments, thoughts, ways to find you, all that stuff. Go ahead, Morgan. Take it in.
Okay. Well, my final thought is you're absolutely right. The way to start self-editing, the best way to start self-editing is to look in the mirror and then make lists and keep making those lists and be honest about it. I would say that sometimes that can be a habit for people, but if you're just doing it with the understanding that it's a finite activity to clear things out, make those lists. What's not working for you, go down and start scratching off things and get rid of them. And you can say, I'm going to get rid of one of these things every week. You can say one a month. Just take the steps and start getting rid of them. And you will be surprised at what kind of changes you start to see in your life. So I am Morgan St. Knight, and you can reach me at morganstknight@hotmail.com. We do have the links to all our email addresses at the top of this episode page if you are listening to us on Blog Talk Radio on the computer, and you are able to access that. You can also access our website, darkmattersradiocagliastro.com, where we all have our individual biography pages, and our emails are also there, so you can contact us. And you can also listen to our shows and archive there.
Thank you, Morgan. That's a great idea, lists, make lists, but then actually pick them up and use them. Very important. Thank you. And Morgan, your book? Tell us about your book.
Oh, yes, my book. My book is called Curse of Prometheus, A Tale of Medea, and you can actually find it on my website, talesofmedea.com. And I have the links to that on my personal biography page on our radio show webpage. So if you just go up to the darkmattersradiocagliastro.com link on the top of the Blog Talk Radio page and click there and then click my biography page, you will get all the links you need to go out and buy the book.
It's on Amazon, right?
Yes, it's on Amazon.
Right. So make sure you look on Amazon for Morgan St. Knight, find the book, and get the book. Thank you for producing the show tonight, Morgan. Thank you very much. Chris, tell us about your final thoughts and how to find you.
Well, the best thing I can say is before you decide that sorcery is the way you want to go, or any kind of situation, any kind of solution like that, the first thing I suggest that you do is look in the mirror and say, what did you fuck up?
Right on.
And go with the answer from there. You know, if you can honestly say that you've done nothing wrong and you're the one that's totally honest in this and there's nothing left that you can fix, then come see me. You know, because I'm going to ask you the same damn thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get me at my email, which is chrisrogueostrowski@gmail.com, and also on my Facebook page, Hell's Rogue, on Facebook.
Thank you, Chris. And he's not kidding. If you go to him, that's exactly what he's going to tell you. You want to be told about how it is, then Chris is the man. Thank you so much, Chris. And can't appreciate enough, can't talk about enough about how much I appreciate you co-hosting this show with me. Thank you so much.
Which is all mine.
So, final comments on this. Sorcery is hard work, and it is simple and brilliant in the same kind of way that I say a Japanese painting is. It looks like anyone can do it, but go ahead and take the brush and see what you get. There are professionals in this field to come to. You're talking to three of them now. So let me just say that aside from the dogs barking in the background, which is nothing I can do about that right now, let me just say that when you think about what you don't need and you think about what you do need, sometimes these things come up into the same categories and you have to make a choice. If the choice feels really hard to make, then it will equal out as important of a result as the process was of making it. Things weigh out the same way that way. Energy works best against resistance. If you are feeling like it's a really complicated choice, then understand that when you make the choice, you will get a very, very intense outcome. the harder you push, the harder the outcome will push through. It's a really important thing to remember. Selfishness is a really important thing to remember. I recently wrote a book of sigils called Selfish Indulgence, and there are a lot of people who don't understand why I use words like that, because selfishness is important. If you're in an airplane and you're flying with a child and the mask comes down, if there's a need for oxygen, they say put it on yourself before you put it on the child, and that is not inappropriate. That is appropriate. That makes you able to function. You have to take care of the self first. It is vital. If you're coming to pieces, you can't do anything for anybody else, including yourself. Editing is vital. Clear out, clear out, clear out. If you're standing in clutter and chaos, you cannot see opportunity. You certainly can't see possibility. These things are very important. If you want to study sorcery, study with me. And if you want to study with me, there's two ways to do it. If you have a knowledge of my work and you want to contact me, you can talk to me about becoming part of the Wednesday night core classes. If you are new to the work, to my work, you can be well-versed in other things, but if you're new to my work, consider the beginner classes, which start in January. All of that can be found on my website, which is simply cagliastrotheironring.com. One word, cagliastrotheironring.com. It's all there. You can find me there or at sorceresscagliastro@gmail.com. Or you put my name in Google if you have a lot of time. A lot of stuff will come up. I am extraordinarily grateful to the people who get on the air with me to do this work, because this is really a public service. And I don't mean to over-aggrandize what we're doing here, except that this is a public service. Nobody else is really putting it out there like we put it out there. I recently sent some information over to Sirius, and this is my on-the-air statement to them. I will continue to communicate with you until we get our Sirius channel. I want to do that because a lot more people will have access, and a lot more people will be able to participate in the experience of sorcery, either themselves or through this information that we're offering. I am the Sorceress Cagliastro, blood sorceress, necromancer in the hands of 9, honored and excited to do this work. And I want to thank everybody for listening and for participating tonight. Thank you, and good evening.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.